Have you ever worked yourself to exhaustion, built an entire critical system that keeps a company alive, only to have your bonus cut with a casual policy change excuse? What they didn't know was that buried in the contract existed a single clause, a trap I had planted years ago, and when they triggered it, the entire company froze within hours. They thought I was invisible, just another cog in their machine. They were about to learn what happens when the invisible engineer they betrayed holds the keys to everything. My name is Claire Mitchell, and I've spent 7 years building the data infrastructure that keeps Northbridge Analytics alive. Tonight, standing in the corner of our product launch celebration, I watched my work being celebrated while I remained invisible. The conference room sparkled with champagne flutes and forced laughter. Our CEO, Marcus Steinberg, stood at the podium describing revolutionary analytics capabilities to investors and board members. Each feature he demonstrated, every smooth data visualization that drew gasps from the crowd, I had coded them all, debugged them through countless nights, optimized them until they sang. This achievement represents the best of Northbridge's collaborative innovation, Marcus announced, raising his glass. Behind him, the leadership team beamed. Evan Grant, my direct manager, wore that particular smile I'd learned to recognize, the one that meant he was taking credit for something he couldn't even understand if I explained it to him for hours. I nursed my untouched champagne in the shadows near the server room door. 3 months ago, I'd worked 70-hour weeks to meet the impossible deadline they'd set. 2 months ago, I'd solved the latency crisis that nearly killed the project. Last month, I'd rewritten the entire caching layer when our offshore consultants failed spectacularly. Claire. Evan's voice cut through my thoughts. He approached with that same plastic smile, 2 investors trailing behind him. Could you check if the demo servers are stable? We're about to show the real-time processing. Not Claire, come meet our investors. Not, this is Claire, who built what you're seeing. Just another task, another invisible service. They're stable, I replied quietly. I monitored them all afternoon. He'd already turned away, guiding the investors toward the main screen. As I was explaining about my architectural decisions for this system, the words hung in the air like smoke from a fire that had been burning in my chest for months. I slipped out of the celebration and walked to my desk in the empty engineering floor. The June numbers folder sat open on my screen, the folder where I documented every contribution, every critical save, every miracle I'd pulled off. The bonus letter should have arrived today. After everything, after saving their product, after making them millions, I'd calculated my performance bonus would be around $40,000, enough to finally pay off my student loans, maybe take a real vacation for the first time in 3 years. The email was waiting in my inbox, from Human Resources. Subject compensation review. Action required. My hands steady, I clicked open. Dear Claire, following our quarterly review, we regret to inform you that due to adjusted policies regarding technical staff compensation structures, performance bonuses for your tier have been suspended this cycle. Your regular salary remains unchanged. We appreciate your understanding and continued dedication to Northbridge Analytics. I read it 3 times. Each word was carefully chosen, surgically clean, technical staff, your tier, as if I hadn't single-handedly built the system they were celebrating 50 feet away. My phone buzzed, a Slack message from Evan. Saw the HR email. Tough break, but policy is policy. The company needs to optimize spending. You understand. BTW, can you ensure the Beijing demo runs smoothly at 3 a.m. Thanks. 3 a.m. Another invisible sacrifice expected without question. I stood up slowly, walked to the window overlooking the parking lot. Evan's new Tesla sat in the spot closest to the building. A $90,000 car purchased, he'd bragged, with his last bonus, the bonus for delivering my work. They hadn't just stolen my money. They'd erased my existence from my own creation, reduced me to a ghost that kept their machines running while they danced in the spotlight. I returned to my desk and pulled up a different folder. One I'd created 2 years ago, labeled simply Insurance. Inside was a scanned contract, a software licensing agreement with our primary infrastructure vendor. My eyes found Section 14.3 subsection B, the clause I'd fought to include when they'd first tried to replace me with cheaper contractors. They thought I was invisible. They were about to learn that invisible doesn't mean powerless. I didn't explode. I didn't storm into Marcus's office or confront Evan at the celebration. Instead, I sat in the darkness of the engineering floor, letting the rage crystallize into something colder, more useful. The next morning, I arrived at 7:30 a.m. as always. Evan barely looked up when I passed his office. The other engineers mumbled greetings, absorbed in their screens. Everything normal, everything routine, invisible. I began my documentation differently that day. Every bug I fixed, every system I optimized, I recorded with meticulous detail, not for recognition anymore, for evidence. Screenshot after screenshot, commit after commit, building a paper trail they'd never thought to notice because they'd never thought to look at me at all. Mitchell. Evan's voice crackled through Slack at 11 a.m. Clients reporting slow queries on the production cluster. Need this fixed ASAP. I fixed it in 12 minutes, a misconfigured index that any competent engineer should have caught. But Evan wouldn't know an index from his elbow. In the ticket resolution, I wrote simply, resolved. No explanation of how. Let him explain it to Marcus if asked. The silence grew around me like armor. I stopped volunteering insights in meetings, stopped suggesting improvements. When asked direct questions, I gave direct answers, nothing more. They wanted a ghost, I'd give them one. Sarah Kim from the junior team approached my desk that Thursday. Nervous. Claire, I'm sorry about the bonus situation. It's not right. Everyone knows you built this whole thing. Do they? I kept typing, not looking up. Well, yeah. I mean, we all see you here every night, fixing things, making it work. Seeing and acknowledging are different things. Sarah? She shifted uncomfortably. Some of us were thinking about saying something to HR. Now I did look up, meeting her eyes. Don't. This isn't your fight. Keep your head down. Do your work. Get your own bonus next quarter. She left, confused by my calm. She didn't understand that rage had evolved into something more sophisticated. I wasn't interested in allies or sympathy. I was interested in leverage. That night, I stayed until 2 a.m., not to fix their problems, but to study the contract I'd negotiated 2 years prior, back when they'd tried to outsource my entire position to a consulting firm in Poland. I'd fought for one specific amendment. They'd been so eager to keep me just long enough to complete the knowledge transfer that they'd agreed to my terms without truly reading them. Section 14.3, subsection B. The licensed software suite, including all database management systems, API gateways, and processing clusters, remains valid only while Claire Mitchell maintains full employment status with complete compensation as defined in her original employment agreement, including all bonuses, benefits, and supplementary payments as outlined in Appendix J. Complete compensation, including all bonuses. I pulled up our system architecture diagram, tracing the dependencies with my finger. Everything, literally everything, ran through the licensed infrastructure. The beautiful dashboards Marcus showed off, the real-time processing Evan claimed to have designed, the client portals generating millions in revenue. All of it existed only because of software that was legally bound to my complete compensation package. They'd made me invisible, but I was the invisible foundation holding up their entire house of cards, and I had the legal right to step away. I began preparing quietly, backing up my personal files, documenting every system dependency, creating a timeline of events, not destroying anything. That would be sabotage. Simply cataloging what would naturally fail when the licenses expired. Friday afternoon, Evan called an all-hands meeting. Quarterly numbers were exceeding projections. The board was thrilled. Stock prices up 12%. And let's give a special shout-out to our technical team, he said, gesturing vaguely at our corner of the room. Great job keeping the lights on while the real innovation happens. Keeping the lights on, that's what he thought I did. Maintained the status quo while real innovation happened somewhere above my pay grade. I smiled for the first time in weeks. It wasn't a pleasant smile. That evening, as the office emptied for the weekend, I opened a new document. Title: Contingency Planning, License Expiration. I began typing, my fingers steady and certain. They'd taken my bonus, erased my contributions, reduced me to an invisible cog, but they'd forgotten that even invisible things cast shadows. And sometimes, shadows can swallow entire buildings when the lights go out. The cursor blinked on the screen. Monday would be interesting. The memory hit me Sunday night as I reviewed the contract one final time, 2 years ago, almost to the day, sitting in the sterile conference room while Evan explained how the Polish consultants would be augmenting our team. Translation replacing me once I'd trained them. "It's nothing personal, Claire," he'd said then, that same plastic smile stretching across his face. "Just business optimization." I'd watched the consultants fumble through our codebase for 3 weeks before their spectacular failure forced Northbridge to abandon the outsourcing plan. But not before I'd renegotiated my position, and more importantly, the vendor contracts. Our infrastructure vendor, Systematic Solutions, had been eager to maintain the relationship. Their sales rep, Jordan Walsh, had practically begged me to stay on as the technical point of contact. "You're the only one who actually understands our platform," he'd said. "Without you, this whole implementation falls apart." That's when I'd made my request, a small addition to the licensing terms, a safety net. I need a clause that ties the license validity to my employment status. I told Jordan over coffee. Full employment, including all compensation elements. He'd frowned. "That's unusual. Why would you?" "Because I'm tired of being treated as disposable. This protects both of us. You keep a knowledgeable contact, and I keep my job security." Jordan had fought for it with his legal team, and somehow, miraculously, it had made it into the final contract. Section 14.3 subsection B. Evan had signed it without reading, too focused on the immediate crisis to notice the bomb I'd planted in the fine print. Now, 2 years later, that forgotten clause was about to become very relevant. I pulled up the email chain from that period, reading Evan's dismissive messages about standard vendor paperwork and routine renewals. He'd forwarded the contract to legal with a single line, "Same as last year, just approve it." Legal had approved it, Marcus had signed it, the board had ratified it as part of the quarterly vendor review, buried in 100 other routine agreements. Monday morning, I arrived at 6:45 a.m. Before even the security guard had finished his first coffee. I needed to verify one last detail. The license renewal date was coming up in 3 weeks, but the validation check, the system's automatic review of compliance terms, ran monthly. The next check was scheduled for Wednesday at midnight. When the system ran its validation, it would find that Claire Mitchell had not received her full compensation as defined in her employment agreement. The license would be flagged as non-compliant, and according to the terms they'd all signed, the software would enter a 7-day grace period before shutting down completely. I could have triggered it manually, could have sent an email to Jordan at Systematic Solutions reporting the violation, but that would leave my fingerprints on the disaster. Better to let their own automated systems discover what they'd done. I spent Monday and Tuesday in perfect normalcy, fixed bugs, attended meetings, responded to Evan's increasingly demanding requests with the same quiet efficiency. When Marcus passed me in the hallway, he looked through me like I was furniture. Tuesday afternoon, a junior developer named Marcus Taylor found something odd. "Hey, Claire," he said, hovering near my desk. "I was reviewing our vendor contracts for the security audit, and there's this weird clause in the Systematic Solutions agreement." My fingers never paused on the keyboard. "Which clause?" "Something about employment status affecting license validity. Section 14.3. I glanced at it briefly. Probably standard employment verification stuff. Most enterprise vendors want to ensure continuity of technical contacts. He frowned. "But it specifically names you." "I was the technical lead during negotiation. It's not unusual." I turned back to my screen. "Did you need something else?" He walked away, uncertain but not alarmed enough to escalate. Why would he? It was just another piece of paperwork and a mountain of contracts nobody really understood. That night, I backed up my personal projects one last time and cleared my browser history. I updated my LinkedIn profile. Though I didn't make it public yet, I wrote a draft email to Jordan at Systematic Solutions, expressing concern about potential compliance issues. But I didn't send it, not yet. Wednesday arrived gray and drizzling. The office felt subdued. Everyone focused on end-of-quarter deliverables. Evan sent 17 emails before noon, each more frantic than the last about client presentations and system performance. I responded to each one professionally, fixing what needed fixing, maintaining what needed maintaining, a ghost fulfilling its purpose, haunting the machine. At 11:58 p.m., I sat alone in my apartment, laptop open to our system monitoring dashboard. Everything glowed green, healthy, stable. 11:59 p.m. The validation check would run in 60 seconds, an automated process, checking thousands of compliance points across dozens of contracts. Just another invisible mechanism keeping the lights on. Midnight. The dashboard flickered once, so briefly you'd miss it if you weren't watching. Then everything returned to green. But deep in the system logs, a single line appeared: License validation warning, compensation clause violation detected. 7-day grace period initiated. The countdown had begun. Thursday morning arrived with deceptive calm. I sipped my coffee in the break room, watching Evan stride past with his usual self-importance, phone pressed to his ear, promising impossible deliverables to someone who probably didn't understand them either. The warning message sat buried in the system logs. Line 847293 of Wednesday's validation report. Nobody would see it unless they knew exactly where to look. And why would they? The dashboard showed green. The clients were happy. The money was flowing. I continued my routine with mechanical precision. Debug, deploy, document, every action recorded, every change logged, creating an irrefutable record that I was doing my job, fulfilling my responsibilities, being the invisible force they'd reduced me to. Friday brought the first hint of trouble. A junior developer flagged an odd notification in the vendor portal, something about compliance review pending. Evan dismissed it with a wave. Probably automatic renewal garbage. Claire, handle whatever this is. I logged into the portal, examined the message with performed concern. It's flagging a compensation clause issue. Should I contact legal? Christ, no. Legal takes forever. Just tell the vendor everything's fine. We pay our bills on time. I drafted an email to Jordan at Systematic Solutions, professionally noting the warning and asking for clarification. His response came within an hour. The system shows a violation of Section 14.3b. Please verify that all employment compensation terms are being met. You have 5 days remaining in the grace period. I forwarded it to Evan without comment. What the hell is Section 14.3b? He messaged me on Slack. I'll pull the contract, I replied. I sent him the full agreement, all 47 pages, with the relevant section highlighted. Watched the typing indicator appear and disappear 6 times as he presumably read and reread the clause. His office door slammed shut. Through the glass, I could see him on the phone, gesticulating wildly. By Monday, quiet panic had infected the leadership floor. I heard fragments of heated conversations. Legal oversight, vendor management, compensation structure, but still, nobody connected the dots. They thought it was a paperwork error, a misunderstanding that could be smoothed over with a phone call and maybe a small fee. Rebecca Holt from legal appeared at my desk Monday afternoon, her usually perfect composure slightly frayed. Claire, I need to understand this vendor clause. It ties our entire infrastructure license to your complete compensation package. That's what it says. I kept my voice neutral, helpful even. Including bonuses. As defined in Appendix J of my employment agreement, yes. She pulled up a chair, lowering her voice. When was this clause added? 2 years ago, during the outsourcing evaluation, the vendor wanted continuity assurance. And management approved this. I pulled up the email chain, showed her Evan's signature, Marcus's approval, the board's ratification. Her face went progressively paler with each document. "Claire," her voice dropped to almost a whisper, "do you understand what this means? If you haven't received your full compensation, then we're in violation of the license agreement and the grace period." I checked my phone with practiced calm. 3 days, 14 hours, and 37 minutes. She stood abruptly. "I need to make some calls." Tuesday was beautiful chaos. Emergency meetings spawned other emergency meetings. The leadership team huddled in the conference room, their voices carrying through the walls. Its security ran frantic diagnostics, trying to understand what would happen when the license expired. I answered every question with technical precision. Yes, the entire infrastructure would shut down. No, there was no backup system. They'd decided it was too expensive last year. Yes, this would affect all client portals. No, I couldn't prevent it. I didn't have the authority to modify vendor contracts. Sarah Kim found me in the server room that afternoon, doing routine maintenance. "Claire, everyone's freaking out. They're saying the whole system might crash." "Not crash," I corrected, checking cable connections. "Legally deactivate. Because of your bonus." I looked at her directly. "Because of contract compliance." "But can't you just, I don't know, fix it?" "I'm not authorized to approve compensation packages. That's leadership's responsibility." She stared at me, and I saw the moment understanding dawned in her eyes. You knew this would happen." "I knew the contract terms. Everyone who signed it should have known them too." Wednesday morning, 22 hours remaining. Evan hadn't been in the office since Tuesday afternoon. Marcus had called an emergency board meeting. The stock price had dipped 3% on rumors of technical difficulties. I continued working, fixing a minor bug in the reporting system, optimizing a query that had been running slowly. The junior developers watched me with a mixture of awe and fear, like I was defusing a bomb while humming a tune. At 4:15 p.m., Rebecca Holt returned to my desk with Marcus and 2 board members I'd never seen before. "Ms. Mitchell," Marcus said, using my name for possibly the first time ever, "we need to discuss the situation." "Of course," I replied, saving my work. "How can I help?" The next words clearly cost him physical pain to speak. "It seems there's been an oversight regarding your compensation." I waited, letting the silence stretch until he was forced to continue. "We'd like to resolve this matter immediately." "That's wonderful," I said pleasantly. "I'm sure accounting can process the payment quickly. The full bonus amount was $40,000, as outlined in my performance agreement." One of the board members shifted uncomfortably. "Given the circumstances, we were hoping we could negotiate." "I'm sorry," I interrupted gently, "but the contract doesn't allow for negotiation. It requires full compensation as defined in my employment agreement. Anything less maintains the violation." They exchanged glances. Marcus's jaw clenched. "Fine, 40,000, plus the standard interest for late payment, as specified in Section 7.2 of the Employee Handbook. That would be," I pretended to calculate, $42,400. The silence was deafening. "Time's running out," I added helpfully. 20 hours and 12 minutes, to be exact. Wednesday evening dissolved into controlled hysteria. The IT department worked frantically, trying to create backup systems that should have been built years ago. Developers who usually left at 5 p.m. sat hunched over keyboards, copying critical data to local drives. The conference room stayed lit, filled with legal teams and executives video calling the vendor's headquarters in Singapore. I remained at my desk, calmly working through my task list. When someone asked for help, I provided it. When they needed system information, I shared it. Professional, efficient, invisible. At 9 p.m., Marcus Taylor, the junior developer who'd first noticed the clause, approached nervously. "Claire, I've been digging through the contract details. This clause, it's bulletproof. Legal says there's no workaround." "They're good lawyers. They should know." He sat down uninvited, lowering his voice. Did you plan this 2 years ago? I continued typing. I negotiated for job security during a time when they wanted to replace me. That's all. But you knew, when they cut your bonus, you knew this would happen. I knew the contract terms. Whether management knew them is their responsibility, not mine. He was quiet for a moment. They're terrified upstairs. Marcus is calling board members at home. Evan hasn't been seen since yesterday. Evan's probably updating his resume. I pulled up another terminal window. Smart move, honestly. Aren't you worried about retaliation after this gets resolved? I finally looked at him. Retaliation for what? For their failure to honor a contract they signed. For their violation of my compensation agreement, that would be an interesting lawsuit. He left, shaking his head. Around 11 p.m., the office started emptying, but the lights on the executive floor stayed bright. Through the glass, I could see Rebecca Holt surrounded by stacks of papers, her phone constantly at her ear. Thursday, 7 a.m., 13 hours remaining. I arrived to find security guards at the server room doors, not to keep people out, but to prevent anyone from trying any desperate hardware modifications that might void our insurance. The morning email from Marcus was company-wide. Technical maintenance scheduled. Some systems may experience interruptions today. We apologize for any inconvenience. Technical maintenance. Even now. They couldn't admit the truth. At 9 a.m., Jordan Walsh from Systematic Solutions called my personal phone. Claire, I'm getting absolutely hammered by your leadership team. They're demanding we extend the grace period. That's between you and them, Jordan. You know I can't extend it. The validation system is automated. Once it flags a violation, only compliance resolution can stop it. I know. He sighed. They're offering us a lot of money to somehow make this go away. Can you? Not without violating our own audit requirements. We're a publicly traded company. We can't just ignore our own contracts because a client asks nicely. Or not nicely, I'm guessing. Your CEO might have used some colorful language, yes. After the call, I walked to the break room for coffee. The usual chatter was replaced by hushed anxiety. Everyone knew something was wrong, but the full scope remained unclear to most. It's like Y2K, someone whispered. Except real. Sarah Kim intercepted me on the way back. Claire, there's a rumor that you're the only one who can fix this. That's not true. Management can fix it easily. They just need to honor my employment agreement. But they're going to pay you. Right, Rebecca Holt was down in accounting an hour ago. We'll see. At 11:30 a.m., an emergency all-hands meeting was called. Marcus stood at the podium. His usual polish cracked. Team, we're experiencing a vendor compliance issue that may affect system availability. We're working to resolve it immediately. Someone from sales raised their hand. Will this affect client access? We're exploring all options to minimize impact. That's not an answer, the salesperson pressed. Marcus's composure finally snapped. If we don't resolve this by midnight, every system we run will shut down. Every single one happy. The room erupted. Voices overlapped. How is this possible? Who screwed up? What about our clients? Through it all, I sat quietly in the back row, sipping my coffee. At 2 p.m., Rebecca Holt appeared at my desk with a printed check, $42,400, signed by Marcus himself. Deposit this immediately, she said. I examined it carefully. This needs to clear before the validation system will recognize compliance. It's a certified check. It'll clear today. Actually, certified checks can still take 24 to 48 hours for full verification in the vendor's system. Her face went white. You're joking. I'm not, but there is one option. I pulled out my phone. A wire transfer directly to my account would register immediately. I can provide the routing numbers. She grabbed the check and practically ran back to the elevator. 4:30 p.m., 7.5 hours remaining. The wire transfer hit my account at 5:17 p.m. I immediately logged into the vendor portal and updated my compensation status. The system showed a pending verification message. Compliance status will be updated within 2 to 4 hours. I forwarded the confirmation to Rebecca, Marcus, and the entire board. Then I stood up, packed my personal items into a small box, and walked toward the elevator. "Claire," Sarah called out, "where are you going?" "Home. My work here is done for today." "But what if something goes wrong? What if the system doesn't update in time?" I turned back, meeting the eyes of everyone now watching. Then I guess management will learn the value of keeping their promises and the cost of making people invisible. The elevator doors closed on their shocked faces. 7 hours remained on the countdown, and for the first time in months, I didn't care about the systems I'd built. They could sweat through every remaining minute. At home, I poured myself a glass of wine and opened my laptop. The vendor portal showed the compliance check still processing. 6 hours and 43 minutes until midnight. My phone buzzed constantly. 17 missed calls from Evan, who had apparently resurfaced. 12 from Rebecca Holt. 23 from unknown numbers that were probably board members or emergency consultants they'd hired to try to crack the system. I ignored them all and pulled up the system monitoring dashboard on my personal VPN. Everything still glowed green, but I could see the frantic activity in the logs, desperate attempts to clone databases, mirror services, create any kind of backup. Too little, too late. At 8 p.m., I opened the folder I'd named Insurance 2 years ago. Inside were all the documents that told this story. Contracts, emails, meeting notes where Evan had taken credit for my work, performance reviews that praised my contributions while denying my promotions. I selected them all and uploaded them to my personal cloud storage. Evidence, in case anyone tried to rewrite history later. 9:15 p.m. The vendor portal finally updated compliance check in progress, estimated completion 11:45 p.m. 15 minutes before midnight, they were going to experience every second of dread possible. My phone rang again. This time, I recognized the number. Jordan Walsh from Systematic Solutions. "Claire, your payment has been verified on our end. The system will update compliance status at 11:45 p.m., assuming no other violations are found." Other violations. Standard secondary check, employment status, access rights, the usual. Just confirming. You're still technically employed there, right? I smiled at the darkness outside my window. "Yes, Jordan, still technically employed." "Good, then you should be fine. Though I have to say, I've never seen executives this panicked about a compliance check." "They're very thorough about contract management," I said dryly. After the call, I made myself dinner and ate it slowly, savoring the quiet. No Slack notifications demanding immediate responses. No emails marking everything urgent. Just silence and the knowledge that somewhere across the city, the people who'd erased me were finally seeing the shape of my absence. At 10:30 p.m., Evan finally tried a different approach. A text message. "Claire, please, we need to talk. The company could collapse. Hundreds of jobs are at stake." I typed back, "The compliance check is processing. There's nothing I can do now." "But you could have warned us earlier." "I could have. Just like you could have included me in the product launch, or acknowledged my contributions, or paid my earned bonus without being forced by a contract clause." No response came. 11 p.m., 1 hour remaining. I pulled up LinkedIn and noticed something interesting. 3 Northbridge developers had updated their profiles in the last 2 hours. The rats were already looking for lifeboats. 11:30 p. Rebecca Holt called once more. This time, I answered. "Claire, the portal still shows pending. If this doesn't update in time, it will update at 11:45 p.m. How can you be sure?" "Because Jordan Walsh told me directly. You could have called him yourself, but I suspect he's tired of being screamed at by Marcus." A pause. "Claire, when this is over, we need to discuss your future here." "We certainly do," I agreed. "I have some thoughts about restructuring my role and compensation package." That's extortion." "No, Rebecca, extortion would be if I had caused this problem. I didn't. I simply worked within the contract your company signed. What I'm suggesting now is negotiation. something that should have happened instead of arbitrarily cutting my bonus. Marcus won't agree to. Marcus just learned that I'm not as invisible as he thought. He'll agree. I hung up and switched back to the monitoring dashboard. The junior developers were still at the office, watching the same screens, waiting for either salvation or disaster. 11:40 p.m., 5 minutes. A group message appeared in the company Slack from Marcus. All hands on deck. Prepare for potential system restoration if needed. Do not leave your stations. 11:43 p.m. My phone buzzed with a direct message from Sarah Kim. Claire, everyone's literally holding their breath here. Marcus is pacing. Evan looks like he might throw up. 11:44 p.m. The vendor portal refreshed one more time on my screen. Status updating. 11:45 p.m. The compliance badge turned green. All contract requirements satisfied, license valid and active. I screenshotted it and sent it to the entire company Slack channel with 2 words, compliance restored. The relief was palpable even through digital messages. Celebrations, thank yous, even a great job. Claire, from someone in sales who'd never acknowledged my existence before. But the most interesting message came from Marcus, sent only to me. My office, 9 a.m. tomorrow. We have much to discuss. I poured another glass of wine and raised it to my reflection in the dark window. They wanted to discuss my future. Good, because I had a new contract draft already prepared, one that would ensure I was never invisible again. The war wasn't over, but tonight, I'd won a battle they didn't even know they were fighting until it was almost too late. My phone buzzed once more. Evan. That was incredibly unprofessional. I typed back, No, unprofessional was cutting my bonus after I built your entire infrastructure. What I did was business, just business optimization, as you would say. Then I blocked his number and went to bed. Tomorrow's negotiations would require me to be well rested. The ghost had revealed itself, and Northbridge Analytics would never forget what they'd seen. Friday morning arrived crisp and bright. I dressed carefully, not the usual jeans and hoodie that had made me invisible for years, but a sharp business suit I'd bought 2 years ago and never worn. If they wanted to negotiate with the person who held their infrastructure hostage, they'd negotiate with a professional. I arrived at 8:45 a.m., 15 minutes before the meeting. The office felt different. Conversations stopped when I passed. The junior developers watched me with something between fear and admiration. Sarah Kim actually applauded softly as I walked by her desk. At 9 a.m. sharp, I knocked on Marcus's door. Come in. The room was full, Marcus behind his desk, trying to project authority he no longer had. Rebecca Holt with a stack of legal documents. 2 board members I recognized from Wednesday's panic, and Evan, sitting in the corner like a scolded child, unable to meet my eyes. Ms. Mitchell, Marcus began formally. Please, have a seat. I remained standing. I'll stand. Thank you. This won't take long. He bristled but continued. We need to discuss the events of this week. The events where you discovered contract compliance matters? Yes. That was educational for everyone. One of the board members, an older woman with silver hair, leaned forward. Ms. Mitchell, while we appreciate that the immediate crisis has been resolved, your actions could be construed as completely legal, Rebecca interrupted, shooting a warning glance at the board member. Ms. Mitchell operated entirely within her rights. Thank you, Rebecca. I pulled out my phone and opened a document. Now, let's discuss the future. I've prepared a new employment contract. You've what? Marcus's composure cracked. A new contract. My terms for continuing to maintain the infrastructure that, as we've all learned, is rather critical to operations. I cast the document to the conference room screen. They read in silence, faces progressively paling. These demands are outrageous. Evan finally spoke, his voice hoarse. A 50% salary increase, guaranteed annual bonuses, co-architect title, and a board-approved severance package that includes a 2-year license transfer period, I added, during which the vendor contract would need to be renegotiated without my employment clause. This is, Marcus started. Less expensive than what happened yesterday. I pulled up another document. I calculated the cost of yesterday's near disaster, engineering overtime, emergency legal consultation, the 3% stock drop, client confidence damage, roughly $4.7 million in direct and indirect costs. My compensation package increase amounts to about $200,000 annually. You're getting a bargain. The silver-haired board member studied me carefully. You've thought this through? I've had time. Being invisible gives you lots of time to think. We need to discuss this privately, Marcus said through gritted teeth. Of course. You have until end of business today. After that, I'll need to consider other opportunities. I'm sure our competitors would love to hear about someone who single-handedly maintains Northbridge's entire infrastructure. Rebecca's eyes widened. You wouldn't violate your non-compete, which expired last month. Another detail in the paperwork nobody bothered to track. I moved toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Evan. You're notably absent from my proposed reporting structure. I'll be reporting directly to the CTO going forward. Evan's face turned purple, but Marcus held up a hand to silence him. I left them to their deliberations and returned to my desk. The news had already spread somehow. Junior developers kept walking by, pretending to need things from the nearby printer. At lunch, Sarah Kim joined me in the break room. Claire, what you did, it was brilliant, terrifying, but brilliant. It was necessary. They treated you like garbage for years. We all saw it. Nobody said anything. Including you. She flinched. You're right. I'm sorry. We should have stood up for you. No, I said, surprising her. This was my battle, and I needed to win it myself, with the weapons I'd prepared. Your support now is enough. At 3 p.m., my phone buzzed. Rebecca, they've agreed to your terms. Legal will have the contract ready by 5 p.m. I allowed myself a small smile, but I wasn't done. At 4:30 p.m., I walked back to Marcus's office. This time, only he and Rebecca were present. The contract is being finalized, Marcus said stiffly. You've won. I haven't won anything. I've simply been compensated fairly for the first time in years. Is there anything else? His tone suggested he wanted me gone. Actually, yes. I pulled up one more document on my phone. This is my project proposal for the next quarter. A complete infrastructure overhaul that removes the vendor dependency entirely. Built in-house, owned by Northbridge, no external compliance requirements. Marcus leaned forward despite himself. That would take 6 months with a proper team. 3 if you give me hiring authority for 5 senior engineers. The board would never approve that budget. The board just watched their company nearly collapse because of a vendor contract clause. I think they'll approve anything that prevents a repeat. Rebecca nodded slowly. She's right. Marcus, the board is terrified of another vendor lock-in situation. I stood to leave. Think about it. The proposal is in your inbox, along with my recommendations for Evan's replacement, since I assume he'll be transitioning to a new role better suited to his skills. Evan had been moved to strategic planning, a corporate euphemism for, we can't fire you yet, but you have no actual power. He cleaned out his office that afternoon, avoiding eye contact with everyone. At 5:15 p.m., I signed my new contract. The same hands that had made me invisible now handed me a gold-plated pen and smiled for the photo that would go in the company newsletter. That evening, as I packed up my desk, I kept one thing on display, a small framed printout of Section 14.3 subsection B, a reminder to everyone who passed by that the invisible engineer they'd ignored had teeth. Sarah stopped by one last time. So you're staying. For now, on my terms. And if they try to push you aside again, I glanced at the framed clause. Then they'll learn what other surprises I've left in the code. That vendor contract wasn't my only insurance policy. Her eyes widened. There are others. I just smiled and headed for the elevator. Some secrets were worth keeping invisible, until the day they were needed. Monday morning, 3 days after signing my new contract, the office felt different, not just for me, but for everyone who'd witnessed the earthquake that had shaken Northbridge Analytics to its foundation. I arrived at 7 a.m. to find my new office already prepared. Not a cubicle in the developer pit, but a real office with windows, right next to the CTO. My nameplate read Claire Mitchell, Principal Infrastructure Architect. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same woman they'd refused to acknowledge at the product launch now had her name engraved in brass. The company-wide email from Marcus had gone out Friday evening. We're excited to announce Claire Mitchell's promotion to Principal Infrastructure Architect, recognizing her invaluable contributions to Northbridge Analytics' technical foundation. Invaluable. The word tasted like vindication. At the Monday morning all-hands, Marcus stood at the same podium where he'd taken credit for my work just 2 weeks ago. This time, he called me up to stand beside him. Claire will be leading our Infrastructure Independence Initiative, he announced, his smile tight but professional. She'll have full authority to build the team and systems necessary to ensure our technological sovereignty. Technological sovereignty, corporate speak for we never want to be held hostage by our own contracts again. I spoke briefly, outlining the vision for our new infrastructure. No flowery language, no false modesty, just clean, technical truth about what we'd build and why it mattered. The junior developers hung on every word. The senior staff watched with a mixture of respect and wariness. They'd learned that the quiet ones, the invisible ones, were sometimes the most dangerous. After the meeting, Rebecca Holt pulled me aside. Claire, I need you to know, I've reviewed everything, every contract, every vendor agreement, every line of code that might have surprises. I found 3 more instances where your name appears in critical documentation. I kept my expression neutral. Interesting. You really prepared for war, didn't you, years ago, before they even knew they were enemies? I prepared for survival. There's a difference. She studied me. Is there because from where I'm standing, you orchestrated one of the most elegant corporate takedowns I've ever seen, and you did it all legally, using their own signatures against them. They signed contracts they didn't read. They dismissed work they didn't understand. They erased contributions they couldn't measure. I simply made the invisible visible, and cost them millions in the process. Cost them. I turned to face her fully. I saved them. Another company would have hired me away eventually, and then they'd have discovered that vendor clause when it was too late. No negotiation, no grace period, just sudden death. I gave them a chance to make it right. Rebecca nodded slowly. The board sees it that way too. You're untouchable now. You know that they're terrified of you. Good. Fear is just another word for respect when it comes to infrastructure. That afternoon, I interviewed the first candidates for my new team, senior engineers from competitors, each one curious about the woman who'd brought Northbridge to its knees with a single contract clause. I hired 2 on the spot, rebels like me who understood that sometimes the best defense was a carefully hidden offense. As the weeks passed, the story spread through tech circles in whispers and rumors. The engineer who'd weaponized a vendor contract, the invisible woman who'd made herself indispensable. Some called it genius, others called it ruthless. I called it justice. Evan left the company a month later. His strategic planning role mysteriously eliminated in a restructuring. He works for a startup now, I heard, one that doesn't know his history of stealing credit and crushing the people who actually build things. The new infrastructure launched 4 months later, ahead of schedule and under budget. At the launch party, a real celebration this time, Marcus made sure to mention my name 7 times in his speech. The board members shook my hand. The investors asked my opinion. But the moment that mattered most came when Jordan Walsh from Systematic Solutions called to congratulate me. Claire, I heard about your new system, completely in-house, no vendor dependencies. We're losing a major client. I'm sorry, Jordan, nothing personal. Are you kidding? I'm thrilled. That clause you had me add 2 years ago, I've added similar protection to every contract since. You taught the entire industry a lesson about respecting the people who actually do the work. After I hung up, I stood at my office window, looking out at the parking lot where Evan's Tesla used to sit. The spot was empty now. just like the hollow recognition he'd built on others' work. Sarah Kim knocked and entered. "Claire, the team's asking if you want to join us for drinks. We're celebrating the launch." "Thanks, but I have code to review." "You know, you're not invisible anymore. You could celebrate your own success." I smiled. "I know I'm not invisible. That's exactly why I don't need to celebrate. The work speaks for itself now." She left, and I returned to my desk. On my monitor, lines of code scrolled past. The new foundation of Northbridge Analytics. Clean, elegant, mine. They'd wanted me invisible, a ghost in their machine. Instead, they got a reminder that every system, every company, every empire is only as strong as the people they choose to ignore. The vendor contract clause had been my nuclear option, deployed only when they left me no choice, but it was never about revenge. Not really. It was about recognition, about forcing them to see what had always been there, keeping their world running while they celebrated in the spotlight. I opened a new terminal and began typing. Another system to build, another invisible foundation to lay, but this time, my name would be on every commit, every document, every critical piece. Never invisible again. The cursor blinked, the code flowed, and somewhere in the data streams and server logs, if you knew where to look, you could still find section 14.3 subsection B, a ghost of a clause that had changed everything. They'd learned the price of making someone invisible. More importantly, they'd learned that in the digital age, the most dangerous person in the room isn't the one making the most noise. It's the one who writes the rules that everyone else signs without reading. Thank you for listening to this story of corporate justice and the power of being underestimated. Where are you tuning in from today? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever felt invisible in your workplace? How did you reclaim your power? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share your own experiences with office revenge or standing up for yourself. Your story might inspire someone else who feels unseen. Until next time, remember sometimes the quietest person in the room holds all the cards.